Okay, let me grab my share sound, optimize video.
Can indeed, and I'm so delighted that Kevin Feenan has joined us from the States. And Kevin Feenan and myself, we've been working together. Hang on, I'm getting a little feedback, Kevin, for some reason. So can you mute for a moment?
Yep, give me 1 sec. Stop the share, maybe that'll stop the feedback.
Oh, that could be it. Yeah, it could be the sharing itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm delighted. I've been working with Kevin on the Virtual World Best Practice in Education conference, and allow me to introduce Kevin to you. He's president and founder of the Rockcliffe University Consortium, an online organization open to educators and educational institutions dedicated to the advancement of technology in education. And Kevin is about the most knowledgeable person when it comes to learning technologies that I know of by a far of a distance. And he's also a person who's now, with the pandemic, is in high demand. How he makes it available to actually spend almost like weeks on a conference in Second Life is beyond me, because he's the most, he really is busy. But what this Kevin does is he also has beautiful leadership skills. And so he's grouping a couple of us together in the committee. And I've been able to join this committee officially now the second year round, simply because we decided to put the V Languages conference together with the Virtual World Best Practice in Education conference, as we are one of the strands of VB. And it's a great, great privilege and a great honor. And a great honor to be working with such professionals like Kevin. And I've really known him as also being a great, person of great sense of humor. So I won't hold back this great, it was my request. I said, look, please, can you present that amazing conference to the members of the virtual roundtable? And I'm delighted that still somebody is here. It's already late in Europe, it's about midnight. Thank you so much, Kevin, for being here.
Okay, you're very welcome. All right, so let me try the whole sharing thing again. I'm not using a headphone, obviously, so sound's coming through the speakers, so just a heads up there. Okay, let's try this again. And hopefully you can all see that. So my presentation is going to be how I learned to stop worrying and love best practices. And really it's going to be a little bit of a walkthrough in terms of the history of the Virtual Worlds and Best Practice Education Conference, and some of the things that we've learned and some of the things that we've done as we've gone along. There we go. So a bit about myself. I am obviously not first and foremost an educator. However, I do have some educational training, mostly in the outdoor experiential field. So Scouts Canada, PADI underwater diving. I'm an assistant instructor there. I've worked with the Canadian Ski Patrol system with regards to training, a lot of things with regards to medical first aid, O2 provider status through various different organizations. So a lot of my love of education has really come from that particular type of background. I was a trainer for Scouts Canada for close to 15 years or so. So either way, I mean, it's just, I've had this love of education all the way along. My primary occupation, however, is as a management consultant in the IT field, and specifically with regards to government and healthcare. So I realize that those two sound about as far apart as you can get, but it does give me a bit of a perspective in terms of how technology is being used, not just at a small scale with regards to individual educators in education, but also at a very large scale with regards to Fortune 100 companies, governments, banks, insurance companies, these particular types of things. In 2008, I started Rockcliffe University Consortium primarily because I was working on my doctorate in business leadership and was hearing all kinds of things in terms of, oh, you know, we need people to replace these um, business people that are all retiring. And so I decided to apply to a pile of places, never heard back. And so I figured, what the heck, I'll create my own. This was long before the movie, by the way. So it just, you know, I came first. I will state this up front. So either way, having said that, the whole concept did sort of take off fairly quickly with regards to, there was a lot of interest in terms of especially open resources for education. And a lot of this was stemming from this whole concept. And this is a founding idea with inside Rockcliffe, is that for technology to really be accessible for education, it needs to be affordable on a teacher's salary, and it needs to be scalable based on a student's budget. Most pieces of software that are out there do not fit either of those two criteria. And as a result, a lot of educators are in a huge bind. They want to do things very innovative with regards to virtual and augmented reality with regards to their classes, but the school systems don't necessarily are able to, they can't necessarily afford it. And those that do through grant funding or other mechanisms like that, typically those programs are temporary and transient, which means anything that a teacher ends up building tends to only last as long as the grant funding lasts. And as soon as the grant funding runs out, the rest of it goes poof. So not a very good situation to be in. And these were things that we were finding out. You know, obviously you have that type of stuff that you read in the newspaper, but you know, through what we've been doing with Rockcliffe, we've had a very in-depth view from educators, both K through 12 and post-secondary, that are all experiencing the same problem, right? How do you leverage these tools in such a way that it's sustainable? It's no good to develop something for your class 1 year only for it to disappear the next. And it also becomes very difficult to try to prepare learners for the technology education that they're going to need to be prepared for when they can't have exposure to the correct tools. So Virtual World's Best Practices in Education, which is a conference that we, in essence, took over, and I'll explain that in a little bit, but we took that over in 2009. And the original concept of this was basically to bring educators together to discuss the use of virtual worlds and how to apply best practices to these particular areas. Since then, the conference has sort of grown and morphed in order to allow, like a lot of things that you guys have just been discussing for most of the day today. We've been having those conversations for years in terms of how to use Canva, how to use Padlet, how to use Google, how to use all of these open education resources, how to make most effective use of those, how to integrate those with virtual worlds. And of late, we're now starting to get more and more into how to embed augmented reality as far as what we're doing as well. So there's a lot of things in terms of this idea of play, explore, engage, immerse, and learn surrounding virtual worlds and virtual education that we've been talking about for about 14 years now. Next year will be our 15th year, and that we're hoping to be able to do for quite some time. So let me come back a little bit in terms of the origins of this particular conference. In 2007, there was a group of people with inside Second Life that had decided, you know something, we've got a really strong community. Why don't we do a 24-hour conference where we would start at midnight of one day, go to midnight of the next day, and just simply talk nonstop about best practices, education, what have you. The conference was phenomenal. As a matter of fact, people today still talk about the original conference in 2007. And there were, I'm trying to remember now, but I think there were, oh geez, close to about 50 presentations. There was tons, like hundreds of people, thousands of people actually that attended that particular conference. Very well done, very well put together. Unfortunately, in 2008, nobody picked it up. They didn't, the group that was doing it had sort of moved on to other projects. There were other things going on. So in 2008, there were a lot of people saying, hey, what happened to this conference? You started it and then nothing happened. So in 2009, as part of Rockcliffe, we picked it up. We decided that we would take on ownership of the conference and that we would maintain it and manage it ongoing. So as part of that, we ended up rebranding it as the Virtual World's Best Practices in Education Conference. And we, in fact, had a little in-world, when I say in-world, I mean in the Second Life environment, a competition with the community to come up with a logo for us. And this was the logo that one of the people developed, and we've been using it ever since. And to me, I love it because it's in 14 years, it's never become dated, which is, I love that fact. Either way, so the first couple of years, we were sort of feeling our way through in terms of what we were doing here. And you can see some of the pictures here, some of the environments that we had set up. The nice thing about the Second Life environment is it allows you to go in and you can configure that environment however you want. The user creation tools are embedded in the application itself. So we can create a program space, such as the one in the bottom left, right? Or another program space in the bottom right. You know, and we can build that ourselves. We don't need other people to come in and build it for us. We don't need to hire professional programmers. We don't know, you know, a little bit of training, you can go in and you can do this particular type of stuff yourself. And it was great because there were all kinds of educators going in here and they were taking advantage of that capability. You could actually develop scenarios, interactive scenarios for students. And those particular types of things become very powerful because when a student can become actively involved with the environment as opposed to just simply experiencing it or looking at it, it is, from my perspective, it's far more powerful. And I think the learning is far more impactful to the student themselves. Beyond that, there is the social aspect with regards to learning, such that you're not learning in an environment where it's just you and the computer. It's sort of you, the computer, and however many other students plus teacher and teacher associates, what have you, that you can bring into this environment. So learning doesn't have to be a solitary pursuit. It can be a group activity, which again, to me is also very powerful because something that is shared in terms of the way in which you interact, the emotional quotient with regards to not just simply learning, but the ability to share that learning with others and to have them participate and understand where you're coming from, to me is a very powerful thing. We see that a lot in outdoor education and experiential education. Certainly, you know, a lot of other classroom environments take advantage of that where they can. And I think it really provides a unique dynamic that you do not get with a lot of other, like if you take a regular CMS system or a learning management system, you don't get the same type of interaction, right? The technology is pervasive. Pervasive is the wrong word. It's in the way, right? You understand the technology is there. When you come into a 3D virtualized environment, even something as relatively low res as Second Life, the technology eventually starts to disappear to the sides. You're in the environment, you understand you're in a technical environment, but the brain perceives it as a real environment. And after a while, it doesn't make too much of a distinction between the fact that you're doing something potentially physically inside the virtual environment as compared to when you're doing it in this environment, the outside environment. So in terms of our roots, so in 2009, 2010, we were doing all the standard stuff. We were doing presentations, workshops, hands-on workshops, by the way. We were doing a few of those, like where people were actively involved. Discussion forums, demonstrations, immersive experiences, which I want to come back to, exhibits, and then streaming. And all the way along, streaming has been a hugely important piece of what it is that we've been doing. As a matter of fact, and I'm going to come to this in a little bit, but all of everything that we've ever recorded, we have on our YouTube channel. So we have material going back all the way to 2009 in terms of what's there. And people can go back for it. It's on YouTube, so obviously it's free, right? But the entire conference is in fact free. We have never charged anybody for coming to this particular conference. And to be honest, we never will, because these types of best practices, this type of learning needs to be open to all educators, regardless of where you are in the world. So we're trying to maintain that. The conference itself is paid through sponsors, through sponsorship, and through the volunteer efforts of the people that contribute their time to make this particular conference happen, right? So there's a lot of standard stuff that we've been doing, and a lot of the first couple of years was really sort of understanding the differences between running a conference in a live environment versus running a conference in a virtual environment. And there are some differences. There are a lot of things that are just slightly not exactly the same. There's things that you have to work, because I've helped organize real life conferences, right? There are things inside a live conference venue that just are not applicable to a virtual conference area, and vice versa, right? So security, for example, this is probably the easiest example. In a live environment, you physically have to have people running around. You've got people looking after coats. You've got people having to look after wallets. You've got, you've got hosting staff that physically have to be able to walk around and do what have you. In a virtual environment, you can have a tenth of the people essentially doing the same job, but what they're looking out for is vastly different things. You're looking in a virtual environment, you're looking for things such as misuse of the technology. Do people have their setups configured correctly? Is voice enabled? Is somebody having problems with their computer? A lot of the support people for virtual conference are more focused on the idea of technical support than they are doing something like physical security or being a physical host, where you're actually herding people from area to area. Right? The video conferencing aspect of it, the streaming aspect of it, much more complicated in a live environment as opposed to virtual environment, because we have the software tools which are fairly easy to install. And it's almost anybody can do that if you have a fast enough connection. So there's little things like this that we were learning as we went along. And a lot of what we were doing in the first couple of years was standard old hat type stuff with regards to conferences. However, as we started going along, we started to realize that the entire conference experience needs to evolve as we go along. So in 2011, we changed up the format, because those first 2 years, the environments that we had, we rebuilt them from scratch each time. But there was no set theme to what it was that we were doing. And so in 2011, we decided, something, let's actually create a theme around what it is that we're doing here. So rather than just giving it a generic conference name, we actually started to provide theme ideas. in terms of the conference, which we've carried forward from there. So in 2011, the theme was You Are Here. In 2012, it was being epic, and defining what is epic with regards to teaching. In 2013, it was Beyond the Stage, right? And for each one of those, we developed a bit of an explainer for educators as to help them interpret that theme with regards to the way in which that they were approaching education. We found it extremely helpful for doing those particular types of things, because in a lot of cases, the stories that we tell, the narratives that we tell of how education is impacting us and how it's impacting our students is often colored by the events that are surrounding us at the time. So what we found with the theme, which we had actually started, that 1 year before, but that was just sort of a misnomer. This was the first time we were consciously saying, let's do this, right? So the theme gives people an opportunity to reinterpret what it is that they're doing and reinterpret their experiences based upon those particular set of ideas, right? And we always tried to tie it also to a lot of current events, what was actually happening and going on at the time, right? In addition to that, we had the conference venue was built out in such a way that we could reuse it for a couple of years. And so what we've been doing is every 3 years, we maintain the look and feel of the conference in terms of the surroundings, so we don't have to tear it down and rebuild it every year. And then as we go along, for the first year, people are sort of taken aback in terms of what, like this building, especially the one that you're looking at here, blew people away. It was total steampunk and it was incredible. It was amazing. And we hated to blow it away after 3 years, but we said, nope, this is what we're going to do. We're going to blow it away after 3 years. And that's what we did. But in some ways, it's the lack of permanence that helps create those stories as well. It creates the memories in terms of what makes some of these things special. It creates the memories helps with the association between the presentations that you've seen and the lessons that you learn from them, because in some ways your experience, your recollection is tied in part to the experience of the environment that you're in, right? And so these are different things that we've been finding as we've been going along, and we've been playing with that idea ever since. So, so there were a number of different things that we had in here that we were working with. The first thing was obviously the idea of themes, not only with regards to a conference theme, but also the environment theme, how we built everything out. The second one was with regards to interactivity and increasing the amount of interactivity with the conference participants. It's all well and good to have a virtual environment, but if you're not using the environment in the way it's supposed to be used, then you're not making the best opportunity of it. So a good example of that is all these people who basically complain, wait a second, if all you're going to do is bring me into Second Life and show me a PowerPoint presentation, you could have used WebEx for that, right? Or you could have used Zoom, or you could have used Skype, pick your poison, right? Doesn't matter. So really virtual environments like Minecraft, like Second Life, like OpenSim, like even some of the gaming environments, World of Warcraft, right? Where you bring students in for particular learning objectives. The interactivity becomes very, very important because it's part of the learning experience. The idea of co-location was something that we had been doing a fair bit of during that period as well. So at that particular time, while we did have our own location, we were co-hosting events on other people's regions. So University of New Mexico, Pioneer College was another one. There were a few other different groups that we were working with at the time. And so we had spread stuff out and around a little bit. which created some logistical challenges, but was also kind of neat because not only did it provide opportunity to expand the locations that were available to us, but it also provided some branding opportunities with regards to those colleges, those universities, and the programs that they offered. So it provided people with a little bit more experience. Multiple virtual environments. This was a period of time which we were playing around with Second Life, Open Simulator, Cloud Party, which has since disappeared. Facebook bought it and then it just vanished. No idea what they're doing with it. Minecraft, World of Warcraft, there were 3 or 4 other different similar type of gaming environments like that. So we had all these different multiple environments that we were sort of playing around in, which created some unique challenges, which I'm going to come to in a little bit, as part of the conference itself, because these experiences were embedded as part of the conference. By the time we had gotten to this stage, we had actually extended the conference from a 24-hour format to 3 days, 7 by 24. These couple of years as we were going through here were very intense because we did have people from around the world attending this particular conference. There was a huge Brazilian track at this particular point in time, which of course, based on time zones, very early in the morning with regards to North America, more reasonable with regards to Europeans, but it was, perfect for them. We also introduced our journal around about this time, so that we made sure that every time we had a conference that we published our proceedings of those particular events as we moved forward in terms of what was happening. And our archives, we developed our archive system at that point as well. So the Journal of Virtual Studies is the primary journal that we use in order to publish our conference proceedings. The evolution of this has, it is continuing to morph as we go along. But if you want to see some of the presentations outside of YouTube with regards to almost any of these conferences, certainly back to 2011, the Journal of Virtual Studies has all the issues of that information going back. So, it's available for researchers to go in, to take a look at, to go through. It includes both synopses and it includes some papers that were submitted at the same time, right? So, and it's fully peer reviewed. It's open source and it's fully peer reviewed. So, it's, I'm going to do a little plug here. I mean, certainly if you know people that need a place to publish information, we would love to, see more material being submitted. The other thing that we have set up is we have our Rockcliffe University Library Network, where we've also got copies of many of the past conferences included in here. Our library page does a lot more than just the VWBPE in terms of conference. It is a wonderful resource to go in and find additional information with regards to how to use virtual environments, what resources are available out there, what open source journals are available that people can go and take a look at. So there's all kinds of information in here, in addition to a lot of the VWBPE conference proceeding information as well. So then we get into the next period of time, 2014 to 16, which is where we changed the theme up again. And now we've got more of a Greco-Roman type theme with regards to what's here. So connections, crossroads, and horizons were the next 3 that we had sort of gone through. And again, as we were evolving the conference, we started to introduce some additional components. Again, this is all about evolution. This is not about being stagnant with regards to technology, but taking a look at a period of time and saying what technology is available to us and how can we integrate that into what it is that we're doing. So at this time, we introduced the idea of a quadrivium, which is a very old Roman term in basically bringing people together from different compass points and bringing them together in order to have essentially academic discussions. We use those quadriviums in order to crowdsource literature reviews on current events and topics. And then the outcome of that is developed into a paper, which is then published in the Journal of Virtual Studies. So that was something new that we had developed specifically for our conference. A lot of things that we had done with regards to accessibility were sort of nebulous in terms of the previous conferences up to this point. Around about 2014, we started to insist upon full accessibility of our presentations. So what I'm referring to here is a speakeasy presenter tool, is where we've basically gone to all the presenters and said, please write out what you're going to say in advance, so that as you are going through, you can use this little speakeasy tool. You just simply plug your text into it and then just hit the button, and it will read the what it is that you're saying out to everybody, so that if there's people that are hard of hearing, and we do have a number of people that have hearing difficulties, right, they can at least read along with what's going on. And believe me, that's a challenge, right, in terms of getting people to pre-write out what it is that they're doing in advance. Believe me, I know, because I was one of those people that just like, I can't do it, don't ask me to. And now, with the exception of what we're doing right here, which I will fully admit I should have written this out all in advance, but we insist on it going forward, so that we have full accessibility for people with disabilities. In addition to the speakeasy tools, we also have live transcriptionists, because not all presentations, despite our best efforts, can be necessarily written up in advance. So we worked with we still work with a group called Virtual Abilities, which provides people that can do, as you're talking, they will then transcribe what you're talking into text. And they will do that live. Now, it's not word for word, but it's sufficient enough that somebody who has hearing difficulties can, follow along. They can participate in the conference. And for a lot of universities and colleges and what have you, especially in the U.S., they have to be what's called Section 508 compliant. And what we've tried, which is essentially making sure that anybody with a disability can be, fully participate in the educational experience. So since 2014, we have been pushing this idea of the conference being fully 508 compliant as far as we can. And we've been pushing those ideas because it is a core aspect with regards to education, especially post-secondary. It is a core aspect with regards to universities and colleges maintaining their certifications, right? How do we do that in a virtual environment when you're dealing with virtual reality, augmented reality, extended reality, pick whichever letter you want, right? Something reality. This is a challenge, right? And a lot of technology companies just simply do not acknowledge the fact that they need to make their tools accessible, because they get all befuddled with the shininess, right, of the tool, what it can do. Mind mapping, for example, you use something like MindMaster and create a mind map, right? Well, how accessible is that, right? Well, not very, right? There's a lot of other, there's tons and tons and tons of other examples where the software has been written specifically for able-bodied people and ignores those people who have disabilities of various different kinds, right? And how do you allow them to access these particular tools? It's a huge challenge with regards to education, and is something that we try to make sure that we include as part of our conference, not only in terms of how we develop things, but also how we ask our presenters to relate their materials. Like, how do they make their materials 508 compliant? So object naming, for example, inside a virtual environment. Let me go back up. So all of these different areas that you see here, all the chairs, all the walls, everything need to actually be named, right? That is a huge task to do. If you have somebody, and we have had people show up to the conference, believe it or not, who have visual disabilities. And we've had a couple who are actually completely and totally blind, which I know sounds weird going into a virtual conference like this, but it happens. And we try to, again, 508 compliancy, right? So we try to make sure that everything that we do adheres to those particular conditions, such that should at some point somebody decide to audit us and say, what are you doing? Well, we can show them the best practice in terms of how you go about doing that. One of the other things that we introduced at that time was we introduced a new award system called the Thinkerer Award. And this is an award that we introduced for leadership it's a lifetime award for leadership in education, based upon Dr. Selby Evans, who's well into his 90s at this point. It's his avatar name, his Thinkerer, right, was the one that we had basically approached to basically say, could we, create an award sort of, based upon your contributions to the educational field, right? And so this award is specifically for the development of leadership, the development of community with regards to virtual environments. And so, obviously we've had 8 recipients to this so far. Each one of these people have shown a lot of community building, a lot of not just team spirit, but I mean, they have been instrumental in developing an educational community that fosters a specific aspect of best practice, right? If they had not been doing what it is that they were doing, best practices in education would be lesser for it today, right? They have made significant contributions all the way along, right? I'm not going to get into each one of them individually. We do have them listed on the website, but it was something that we felt was needed, right? Because there wasn't anything out there that sort of recognized these people's achievements, nor what their contributions are towards education, towards virtual environments, and how those two sort of connect to each other. About this time, we also took over our own streaming and video archives. Up to about this time, we were working with a group called Treat TV, who was doing all this stuff for us, but they disappeared. They, as it is with a lot of other things, again, what I was talking about before with regards to, organizations coming along. Organizations coming along, they get limited amounts of funding for certain things, and then all of a sudden they disappear because the funding dries up or because the business model doesn't work, right? So we ended up taking it on ourselves, right? And as part of that, we've moved all of our archives over to YouTube, right? So I'll give a little example here. Each year we try to increase the production values of the final edit. On our YouTube channel, what you see is you can see the raw feed, because we do stream in real time, and then we do the post editing. And I'll just play a little bit of the post editing here, just to give you a little bit of a sample in terms of. And I don't know if the audio is coming through or not.
It's coming through.
Okay, all right, because I've got this set up so that the audio from this goes through my headset, but. I think the interesting thing to note about this is all of this is done.
Hello, everyone.
volunteers.
Welcome to Virtual World's Best Practices in Education 2021. I am Lorraine Mockford, LV across the metaverse. I am the VWBPE 2021 Program Chair. It is my honor to introduce the first keynote speaker of the conference, Professor Dr. Undine Fruming.
Okay, so I'm
Dr.
gonna
Fruming will
hold it
be
up there, 'cause
speaking
I don't
today
want to play
about
more than about a minute of this. But
history of virtual.
oops, here, let me move on to the next slide. But I mean, the core thing about this is that we've trained all the people that do the streaming, all the people that do the post editing, all the people that
Can I have
do the
a
recording.
request?
Sorry, which?
Can I have a request? Because on the slide before, Dean's, you showed the one video that you created with the artwork, the creatures of the mist, and it's so wonderful.
I
Can
actually
you show
have that.
one?
I have that. I'll play it in a little bit.
Yes, please. It's so
Okay,
amazing.
all right. All right, I'm going to come back to that because it's actually part of another section. I realize I've got like 15 minutes here and I'm hoping I'm going to be on time here. So, so either way, we started taking over a lot of stuff and we've had various different people come on board. Heike's been helping us the last couple of years with regards to training the videographers. But everything that you see with regards to our videos since about 2014 has been the result of volunteers coming in and learning how to do this, learning how to create video, learning how to, like a lot of things that people go to school for a long period of time. They've been learning this as they've been doing this. And these are other skills that can be applied to different areas of educational usage, right? All using open source tools, which has been phenomenal. And then of course we can publish them to use. Sorry, I'm going to have to qualify that a little bit. I do, in terms of post editing, I do use Camtasia and I do have access to Adobe Premiere, neither one of which is cheap. So I will fully admit that the post-production is being done in a professional piece of software, but everything up to that point has all been done using open resource tools. And there are other open resource tools that you can get to even do the post editing of these things. I'm using those other ones just because, you know, I can, right? So the next series of 3 years, 17 to 19, we changed things up again. We got trashed the old environment. We brought in a new one, which had this time it's more of a nautical theme, a lot of open water, a lot of underwater environments, in order to conduct classes, in order to conduct sessions in. And so again, we're trying to mix things up on people. Excuse me, we're trying to give them opportunities to reimagine how it is that they would give a presentation if the standard constraints of 4 walls and a picture viewer were sort of taken away from them, right? What could they do differently? How could they expand upon the use of the environment? A lot of people can't wrap their head around that, right? But there's a number of people who can. The social committee did a phenomenal job in terms of the use of space, in terms of what they were doing here. But we had this top picture that you see here. This is all a quadrivium location where we had open discussions, forums, workshops, not workshops, but forums, discussions, what have you. Very open to that type of communication. Similar type of thing at the bottom here. This was the beginning to the social area. And from here, people could go from here and they could take cable car rides, they could do submarine rides, they could go swimming, they could go motorboating, they could dance, they could all kinds of different social activities off of what was there. The social committee really sort of stepped it up during these 3 particular years. So there were a pile of things that did change. So about this time was when VLanguages, near the end of this time was when VLanguages came on board, which was, you know, Heike, thank you very much, right? Because there's a lot of interesting content that you guys have brought to the fold. We also started to look at more self-developed content. So while a conference typically is a lot of things that you ask for presentations or you tap somebody in the shoulder for a keynote, there's a lot of people that, there's a lot of programs that don't self-develop their own content. And we started to get into that particular mode as part of what we were doing here. At the time, our program chair was big into peer-reviewed research and more formalized research. So we put more of an emphasis on that. We also started to develop more formalized gaming and experimentation around formal games as part of the environment. Didn't quite start off that way in 2017, but that's the way it ended up by the time we got to 2019, was that we started off developing a portion of a game in 2017, and then we added to it each year. There was no formal connection between any of it. It just organically evolved, right? One of the other things that we did at this time was we took the idea of our immersive experiences and we spread it out over the course of a month. And part of the reason why we did that was because we were having challenges with, like, somebody would come in, they'd bring in a presentation, they'd say, I want to show somebody our Minecraft environment. Well, you can't bring somebody into Minecraft for the sake of an hour and then expect them to come back to our conference venue. It just simply doesn't work. I mean, we tried to do that in the previous years, but we found that you need more time, right? Primarily because a lot of those things, you look at Minecraft, World of Warcraft, you look at a lot of other types of gaming environments, they require time for setup. They require time to get people to where it is they need to go. Then you've got the actual time of exploring those environments, right? An hour just simply doesn't cut it, right? If you want to show somebody, we had groups that were showing how people were using World of Warcraft in order to show economic principles, the idea of a free market, how it worked, and the ability to experiment with it. You can't do that in an hour when it's a 14 gigabyte download, right? It's just not, and then you have to set up your account and everything else. It just doesn't work. So we moved it off. And so right now the conference runs for only a couple of days, right? So right now we're 3 days in terms of the conference, but all these immersive experiences happen 2 weeks before and 2 weeks after. So in essence, the conference itself is really more like a month, right? Where we've got, on a per day basis, we have these immersive experiences where you get to come in, you can experience, you can interact, you can do workshops, you can do demonstrations, what have you. We give people enough time to demonstrate their experiences using enough time so that people can to understand it properly, right? And then our conference focuses more on those specific conference pieces where we can get people in and out quickly, like in anywhere from 15 to an hour, right? In, out, move on to the next presentation. We also, so that was something big that we did about that time. We also did and yes, I am looking at the time, Heike, so not to worry. I realize I've got like 8 minutes here. The consolidation of the environments. We had gone a little bit too far, too quickly. Open Simulator, Minecraft, a lot of these other things, we brought it back a little bit because doing this from an all volunteer standpoint, it's a lot of work to put one of these conferences together. And when everybody's a volunteer, it's similar to a classroom, right? You have to pick and choose, right? As a teacher, you don't have unlimited time to develop all kinds of different things. You have to choose your time wisely, right? So that was one of the things that we did here. The other thing that we did, and I'm just going to show a little piece at the bottom here. This was something that was set up by one of our builders, and she did this without telling us, and we loved it so much that we've kept it, right? She set up a little Least We Forget memorial area. And she actually did this in the build previous to these 3 years, but we've formalized it at this point. When you're dealing with these particular types of conferences, you make a lot of friends, you make a lot of acquaintances. There's people that you see year after year in terms of these things. And invariably people pass on, right? And sometimes those people that do are, it's sort of like, oh, so sad to hear about that. And then you hear about somebody else and it's, I mean, we all have to go through it, right? But I mean, in some ways it's tragic, right? Because they were such a stalwart with regards to the community, with regards to education, with regards to their students, with regards to their peers, and it impacts people very, very deeply. So we set up this memorial area that we maintain now for every single build, and we bring it forward such that those people that had real impacts on other people's lives but have since passed on, we can remember them and we can remember their contributions. So again, that was something little that we did, that we set up, and I know it's not something that you typically see at conferences, but we've decided to keep that and maintain it going forward. Something not quite as gruesome, gruesome is probably the wrong word, but the scavenger games, like I said, you can see a little bit of one here. We started to do this scavenger game. This was part of the self-created content, right? And it was amazing. It was very, very well received. So well received, in fact, that when we went into this 3-year period, 2020 to 22, right, of which we've now gone through 2 of these 3 years, right, we actually formalized this even more insofar as we have a game in 3 parts now. That is an actual storyline. It's an actual progression. It's been planned out in advance, and it's becoming more sophisticated as we're going along. And this is through the learning that we've had through the other conferences in terms of what people are expecting in terms of interactivity, how they want to work with information, how they want to learn, how they want to apply learning. So we're constantly evolving different things in terms of what we're planning and experimenting with. You can see the tower here, which is our main gateway area, one of the lecture environments. All of this, by the way, with the exception of that landing at the gateway area, is in space. You'll notice a very definite space theme that's here. We challenged everybody for those couple of years to basically say, forget ground level, there is no ground. You're going to have to build 1,000 meters up in the air and figure out how you're going to get your exhibits and everything else to work when you don't have that limitation of having the ground underneath your feet. And some people have taken to it very well and other people have not. But part of the thing that we want to challenge people with here is that as you start seeing Virgin Galactic, you see SpaceX, you see Blue Horizon, I think it's the other one that's up and coming. There's a couple of others that are now talking about space tourism and bringing populations up into space, that we're going to be doing more work in space over the next 20 years. How do you design for those particular types of environments? Because those are the careers that the children in today's classrooms are going to be heading into 15 to 20 years from now. It's not going to be the same old, right? Everything is constantly changing, and education needs to keep up. As a matter of fact, education can't be backwards looking. Education always has to be looking forward to the next 15 to 20 years. You have a group of students in a grade 10 class, right? If you're not teaching them what it is they're going to need to know in 10 years, they're not going to be prepared for it. And things move so quickly that you have to be able to think outside the box for things like this and say, okay, well, what are things going to look like 10 years from now? It's not that we're going to get it right, but to train students properly, you have to be able to, as an educator, you have to be able to think in those particular terms, right? Especially where you've got control over the content. Obviously, there are classes where a lot of people don't. It's just sort of like, okay, here's a math class, teach math, right? Okay, great, right? But there are other classes where there's a great deal of flexibility. So we're evolving as we're going through.
Add to it, one of the experiences. So sorry, you may have to mute for a moment, Kevin.
Yep. Okay. Give me one sec.
One of the social experiences at Virtual World Best Practice in Education this year was that there was a planet or a small moon kind of thing, and it was one of the social activities that you went there to put on some special moon boots, and they made you walk around this moon type of planet upside down. That was about the first time I've ever experienced being upside down in this virtual environment, and there was like only space underneath you, and it was such an impressive experience. When you then ended up at the other side of the moon, you would be automatically transported inside that moon to a very beautiful crystal light of fantasy type of environment. It was so impressive. It was just something beyond. And then to experience that with a group of people, that was just, it was beyond. It was really great.
But these are the types of challenges that we're trying to get people to sort of think of. So, and I do apologize, I did not time this well. I realize I'm really pushing my limits here. So let me very quickly go through this. So we've changed a pile of things with regards to this 3-year period.
You don't have to rush. You don't have to rush. There's nobody after you.
Okay, all right. So we are now looking at more video-based presentations. Obviously, because of the pandemic, a lot of people have expressed an interest for these particular types of Zoom sessions and what have you. Sponsor spotlights, that's more an administrative thing, but we hadn't really done that in the past. The sponsors were good enough that they hadn't asked for, more airtime with people, but as we've been going along, it's becoming more of a thing. And obviously, the idea of education and sponsors is one of those things that gets educators really uptight, but unfortunately, it's also something that we have to deal with. So again, trying to figure out best practices around how to manage some of that ethically is one of the things that we're going to be focusing on over the next couple of years. Presentations which are more micro format, 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute presentations. Right? That's becoming more of a thing in terms of as we're moving forward. We also decided that because a lot of people that are attending our conference are not necessarily researchers, so we decided that we were going to formally separate research and praxis, such that the conference would focus more on the praxis side of things and the journal would focus more on the research side of things. And it's not to say that research is not being presented at the conference, but papers are now uniquely going through the journal, right? So just something to be in mind. Game development and augmented reality are two other things that we're focusing on, like the formalized game development. And Heike, this is for you because hold on. Here we go. This is the piece that I think you're looking for. All right, so this is
wonderful.
Okay, so this is the promo thing. It's only about a minute, but this is the promo for the second part of the Creatures of Myth game, right? So I'll just hit play and we'll go from here. So there we go. And again, all of that was done pretty much with Camtasia, right?
And we have to state that all of these creatures, trees, and cacti type of thing, they're all like made by normal, ordinary people in Second Life.
Oh yeah, well, I mean,
not by computers.
Yeah, no. That was the builds were all done by Letty, who I know you know. The builds were all done by Letty. I went in and did some of the video capture and then put the promo piece together using Camtasia. And it's the entire thing maybe was now granted we were building upon last year, so a lot of things could be repurposed, but it took maybe about a month to put the build together, part-time, not full-time, right? And then the balance of it was probably about another month, so about 2 months altogether to get everything ready. But it would take a good hour to go through that in terms of grabbing the heads-up display and then going through that particular portion of the game, going through finding all the different things that you need to find, going through all the different learning objectives. So from that standpoint, it was actually very, very, like I said, there's a lot of things that we learn every single time we do those particular types of things. And then, of course, we get to the end of every single conference, and we always have a volunteer appreciation party. So this is a short little video that we do for the volunteers just to thank them based upon the end of the year party type of thing. We make sure that all of them get a certificate with regards to their participation, and we keep a record of everybody that's volunteered over the years, so that if somebody needs a letter to go inside their file, like for tenured professors, what have you, or people who are tenured track, right? Often they need to show service, right, in these particular areas. So we not only offer the certificate of appreciation, but anybody that requests one based upon who we know volunteered, we can actually write a letter specifically to their institution to basically say, yes, this person volunteered for these particular roles, these particular hours, and then that can go into their file as they need to. So I'd like to thank you guys very much. I realize I'm now I'm probably going to be about 5 minutes over my time. But I'd like to just thank you guys very much for having me here. And if you have any questions, certainly I'm open to hanging around for a little bit to answer any questions. In terms of references, I can always put this inside the chat as well if you want, but I mean, here's the reference listing for a lot of the things that I was showing you guys earlier, so.
Well, and it's just the impression on the mind. Thank you. It's the impression on the mind for when you experience such a conference, especially in these settings. I mean, it's been a spatial theme this year. In the past, that steampunk auditorium with the typewriters, where you would sit on the typewriter letters of the old typewriter types. And I mean, the fantasy that's gone into the builds is just incredible. And it so sticks in your mind. Yeah, I think literally remember back years, whereas with normal conferences, there's one slide after the other. It's just like it fades away. But with the virtual world best practice in education, this is a lifetime of memory, of learning, and of such a high level of learning. The presentations there at the virtual world best practice in education are literally done by instructional technologists from MIT and Harvard and you name it. So, I mean, the level is just incredible. And the fact that you can attend this for free, It's always been my highlight of the year. Absolutely. For many years, I've been the biggest fan of this conference ever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the numbers, you know, to be honest, I mean, the numbers have trailed off a little bit over the years, because like back in 2009, I think 2011, no, 2010 was the largest conference that we had, close to 3,000 people. Well, sorry, let me qualify that. 3,000 avatars, because because of the way Second Life is set up, we can't tell exactly how many people. Like, we know some of those are alts, right? That the people log in with different alts sometimes, right? But, you know, close to 3,500 unique avatars, right, across the 2 days of that particular conference. Nowadays it varies. It's around 1,200 unique avatars. So say around about 1,000 people, right? Probably once you account for duplicates and other things. But you know, that's still a fairly decent size with regards to a conference. I mean, there's a lot of conferences that are, you know, they get a couple of hundred people, they're quite happy with that. And
that's true.
We've been very fortunate in that there's been a consistent base of people that have been supporting this conference year over year, probably in around the 700-800 range, right? And then depending on whether we're at 900 or whether, like, because 2 years ago we were at like 1,800 people, and then, you know, 15, it varies from year to year. It depends on who we've got as keynotes and what's happening and what's going on and what have you, right? But it's in that range. It's in that 900 to 1,500 range in terms of the number of people that we get. And it's been consistent all the way along. And so this is not a small conference in terms of what we put together, right? I mean, we literally have 80 to 90 volunteers that we recognize every single year just to put the thing on, right? Never mind everything else that goes along with it, right? So just absolutely incredible to you know, see the continuing engagement with regards to this. And like I said, I mean, we're going to continue to evolve and to, you know, ideally, hopefully grow this as we continue to go along. Right? So,
I mean, this would be my dream, that the virtual world perspective education gets the recognition it deserves from the outside world, from the academic outside world. It is more of an in-world event of a grandeur, unmatched. However, from the outside world, like through the live streams, for example, I was always thinking, oh, I wish there was 1,000 people watching the live stream, because this is what they should do, you know. But the virtual worlds as such, there is the plateau of enlightenment coming up. It did have that, the time of trough of disillusionment, according to the Gardner Heights cycle. And so we've been steadily seeing a consolidation. However, the many people that during the hype were there, it never materialized again. So, but it's slowly coming. Hoping that another few pandemics.
Yeah, sort of. One of the interesting trends that we saw this year, and it's been growing a little bit over the last couple of years, as we've been getting better at streaming. We've been noticing that the YouTube numbers have been slowly growing, right? Cool. But this year, like they weren't, you know, they weren't incredibly high, right? But compared to previous years, they had grown substantially, right? Like they more than tripled in terms of YouTube viewership and the number of people that are watching the videos that we have out there right at the moment. So, you know, there was a lot more interest in the online piece rather than people necessarily coming in world, which I thought was really kind of neat, because I don't know if that's a signal that things really are changing in terms of how people want to consume this type of information or not. It's also one of the reasons why we wanted to play a little bit more with the idea of micro formats. things that are 5-10, like things that are a little bit more easily consumable in the 5 to 10 minute range. Right? And again, in part driven by a lot of the social media platforms, right? I mean, obviously a 6-second video, you're not going to be able to, like with some of the platforms, you get 6 seconds or 10 seconds or what have you, right? Obviously that's not long enough to do a lot with. I mean, you can do a lot. There's certainly classes that have done a lot of things with their students in, 6 to 10 seconds. But, in terms of these particular types of conferences, right? You need something that's a little bit longer than that, but not necessarily a full hour, right? Or even a half hour in some cases. So we're playing more with those particular types of things. And I think for next year, you're probably going to see a little bit more in terms of sessions that may be pre-recorded prior to the actual conference itself, right? So we're going to be playing around a lot more with this in terms of moving forward, especially with the pandemic and how people have changed the way, because nothing's ever going to go back to the way it was. It will. People are deluding themselves if they think we're going to go back to the way things were 2 years ago. It's just simply not going to happen. It is going to be a question of how do we move forward, right? And this pandemic having gone on for over a year now, a lot of the, if everything had died out last summer, like it looked like it was going to do, right, rather than resurging, right? We knew it was going to resurge, but if it had died out, then people would have gone back to their old behaviors, right? But it didn't. So we're now into wave number 2, and we're now into wave number 3, and there's concerns with regards to variants, right? People's lifestyles have changed. Education has changed, right? The way in which students relate to online education has changed and is going to continue to evolve.
And especially, like you said, the generation that is just, there go our students, and it's the generation that's coming into the schools and higher education now that have been by the hundreds of million been playing Fortnite, and by the hundreds of million been playing Minecraft. And you want to go, these are the people who are entering university in a couple of years, and so it will change definitely. And so we're looking forward to that exciting time of virtual environments. And I may ask if there's any more questions. We're going to wrap this up for now. It's midnight in Germany.
I do apologize that we're so far over the hour. I did not.
No, actually, you know what? I apologize for not being there at the volunteers meeting last week. I missed it. Stupid me. So Jacqueline says, creative thinking teachers need to be a step ahead of their students. Of course we have to be.
Yeah, no, very much so.
And sweet, we said, the question is, which direction is the step ahead? And is virtual environment worth the effort? Because still is time consuming, as you said, Kevin, with the experiences. It needs a fair amount of time.
Yeah, I think a lot of like because this is something that I've done as part of my career, right? Like as a management consultant, part of the reason why, at my age that I'm still relevant is because I've kept ahead of the technology, right? Is I've tried to always make sure that every year I'm trying to learn something new in terms of what's happening inside the industry, so that the industry never gets ahead of me, right? Because it's the quickest way to become 60 years old and you're a dinosaur, right? Because you haven't kept up with where everything's been going.
Yeah, but you're so far ahead, Kevin. Yeah, we can't even get anywhere close to your level.
But you have to.
When are you actually going to retire eventually? I don't know.
What's retire?
Or have you already retired? I don't know.
Oh goodness, no. Like I said, independent consultant, and I'm probably going to be a lot like Selby, right? I mean,
selfie in the 90s. He's
Oh,
so active.
yeah.
He's so unbelievably active.
Yeah. It's just, it's my
These
one of the
days,
things I've got on my website that I like saying, retirement is for old people, right?
It's true.
Yeah.
Oh, Len, no, come on.
Yeah,
She's still active as
the days are decent away, but I'm not admitting to anything at this point. So
thank you so much, Kevin. It's a
you're
delight.
welcome. Okay.
And thank you. And we'll pass the word of mouth for the Virtual World of Best Practice in Education. Next year, we're going to invite the whole virtual roundtable to the conference.
There we go. Awesome.
Okay.